sector, but to engage into a DI strategy, and to give tips and a framework where you could start your DI strategy, or and engage like the commitment of your organization and the buy-in of it. You will have the space after the walk-in session about exchanging best practices, sharing examples of DI policies or statements or whatever you have already in-house, and to relate personal experiences to the DI strategy. We will not have space here, unfortunately, but later on, yes. So what the program is divided in 3 parts. The first is about what is a DI strategy and why is it important. The second part is the who, so who is engaged into a DI strategy. And the last part, the most practical part, is how. And again, we will not give you everything to start a strategy, but at least some tools. And in the meantime, we will also give you some assignments that you could do or you are advised to do to learn together when you come back to your organization, and to discuss about it also during the walk-in sessions in between the modules. Are there any questions at this point? Is it clear? Okay. So the what? So recognizing DI as a value. Why is DI important? What I noticed in my own practice is when I went to work to an organization with the task of making a more diverse and inclusive organization, is that most people have actually no idea about what it really means and what it really means in the context of the organization. What does the word means, diversity, inclusion, and equity? So in order, to be on the same page, I guess everybody is here specialist, but I have a question to you, and that is, who have a formal definition of diversity, inclusion, and equity within their organization? You can speak if you want. You can put it in the chat, and then I'm interested about your own definition of DI within your organization. Okay. Okay, Daphne, you have a DI statement, although not official ones. I will ask you also a little bit later if you have a DI statement which is already on your website. Please prepare the link, because I will ask you to share it, so that we can also look a little bit on what you have in your organization. Okay, so what I noticed, there's someone, Sunanda, yes?
Yeah, hi, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that was something following up on what you mentioned, that, what does it mean to make it public, or what does it mean that, if you have a formal definition or not? It is part of the strategy, it is part of the process. We have come up with a definition, which I don't remember on top of my head. So, but is it, I mean, unless it's on the website, is it formal enough or not? Is it? Yeah, so that's something that I'm asking everyone, actually, that what do they think? Like, is this, unless and until we express it formally on the website, make this as an announcement to everyone, or yeah.
Thank you very much. It's a very nice question. So, question to the audience: what is the use of the diversity statement, and the use, anyways, of definitions within your DEI strategy?
Yeah, hi, I can only comment. So we have started our journey, I think a year ago, where we hired a consultant to create the diversity, equity, and inclusion framework for us. Because of that, a lot of discussions happened. So we formally do have the framework, and I think that's already a very good starting point. However, we don't yet have it on the website, and right now we're still working on creating from a kind of policy reality or paper reality to more within the whole organization. But I think the fact that this framework has been created has made it easier also to keep ourselves accountable. And I think that's also where putting it on the website increases that, right? Then not only the D&I people can keep the organization accountable, but also our beneficiaries, our partners, everyone in the sector and broader can keep you accountable to that. But I don't personally think that only by putting it up on the website it becomes official, but it is a very good tool for accountability.
Yeah, very good point, Daphne. Thank you very much for your input. And also maybe something to add, it's something having written on paper helps internally to understand, to have a common understanding. And especially when we speak about diversity, often people have a different vision about diversity. It's mostly based on visible diversity, or like in my organization, it was more, okay, we want to have more LGBTQI people, people with a diverse ethnic background. En ervaringsdeskundige, I don't know how to translate that in English, but people with life experiences that mark their identity. And that is it is a choice to focus on these groups, but I think it's also important to show all the diversity dimensions and to name that so that people also don't see diversity based on their own assumptions. And the same about inclusion. I think it's a very so naming the identity and social characteristic are important, but you can also put people into a label. So that's also already a discussion to have with your group or your DI committee or your task force or whatever group is working on that. And the second thing is about inclusion, because when mostly people say like it means that people can be themselves, feel at home and safe, and to be heard and have space to participate, let's say. That's the common definition that we have. But what does it mean to feel at home? It's very different from any person. So it's interesting to ask yourself, what is the meaning of inclusion within our organization, which can vary from an organization to another, but engage in the discussion about what do we want to achieve in terms of inclusion. You need to have a clear definition. And the same about equity. Often this part is forgotten, even in NGO sectors, but it's about, of course, addressing the power relationship between different people and to address systems of oppression. And I think this is also something that can be hide into the positive like party of diversity and inclusion, and that equity is also something like the overall goal, and that means also fighting directly against discrimination and exclusion and stigmatization, etc. We will not make a whole course about diversity, inclusion, and equity, because it's not really the purpose, but to have a common definition, I think it's a first starting point to have. Gigi, what about the time? I think I see yeah, maybe we can already go to the Mentimeter, because I want to ask you a question about what I call the DI case is the why is your organization engaged into DI? There are many reasons about that, so we will send you now a link to oh, here, Gigi, send it in the chat. And you have 3 words to fill in, and then we will see a little bit the results of why your organization is engaged into DI. Gigi, you see something?
I'm opening it now, and I do see some responses, definitely.
Oh, wow. That's small. Gigi, maybe you can read a little bit.
I can read some of
biggest,
the.
yeah, some of them, yes.
So representation is definitely popping out as the main word. I see words such as respectfulness, underrepresented, fairness, to reflect our values. Opposing power structures is something that I see coming back, relating to that decolonizing our sector as a motivation to work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Related to staff, a predominantly white staff, so a lack of ethnic diversity in the organization. The global presence, so that means representation and also recognition. Belonging, being intentional, a lot of words, and then social justice and justice are also popping up. Identity, fairness. Very interesting.
Indeed, and it can gives you, thank you, Gigi, for reading it loud. I think we can share also this to you, or I don't know if it's possible, but via the Teams platform, because these are actually very different focuses that you can have in engaging into a DI strategy. So, or you want to go for representation and that the top is less homogeneous, or having more representation of the global south, or having more representation of certain type of people. Or it is more generally like aiming for more social justice, but then it's important to engage the discussion how DI is indeed, linked to social justice. Especially, I don't see, for instance, in like more in the business sector, it would be more like, oh, it's good for our reputation and our brand, and we want to reach out to more customers, etc. But there is also probably in the NGO world also a link to the people you serve, or and to have a little bit more reflection about what is the direction of your DI strategy. Again, we don't have, and I will show you after in the presentation, we have a kind of a framework that we developed with some, elements that you can take for your DI strategy. But I think this is yours to discuss about that. And then I'm also, maybe Gigi, you can go to the following slide.
Yes.
Are you okay, everybody? Okay, we will have after a panel discussion and a breakout room, so you will be more active. So building again, this is a small example. There is not only one case that you can have, it's also how you like sell it to the people who will be committed into the DI strategy, and you can have also different narratives. Like when you speak about a legal case, it would be like a compliance for, I don't know, representation of women in big companies or something like that. Then you speak more to the HR department or the legal context from an organization that is really for the big organization, but that is a narrative that can also convince certain type of people. If it's about the business case, like more generally, because we want to reach more, I don't know what is your business, but it's more speaking, of course, to the leaders and the beneficiaries of the people you serve in the organization. It can be also a moral case, and that is so linked to social justice, equity, but also like we want to contribute to something in the society, which is in the case of NGOs not really new, but it's important to add that. And there is also the emotional case. And in the part 2, we will work a little bit more on the emotional case. So how do you make it, how do you speak about DEI to people so that they engage into that? So maybe next slide, Gigi. Because you could ask also preliminary the question that you can ask to yourself when you will build, you know, a case. So the case is a basis, and then after you from that build a vision, a mission, and a strategy. And so if you have this case, then you can have more clarity about what direction you will take, because there are so many directions, so you need to have that. And some question would be, if you were sitting here within like 10 years, what should the organization like to you? Or what do you want to achieve with DEI? Or when would you have been successful with DEI? And that are essential questions to ask yourself in order to initiate the strategy and not having, you know, some interventions that pop up somewhere and that have no link with your strategy of your organization. So what we recommend is to make a diversity statement. And again, I ask you know to share your statement. So if you have it, please share it in this chat for to inspire your colleagues. Ensure that you have a DEI vision and mission, which are tied to your organization global vision. What is also recommended before to make this vision and mission, it depends in which order you want to do it, but it's also good to make a kind of diagnostic assessment or an audit or something like that, which can feed also your vision and your mission. Involve, of course, underrepresented groups like DEI committees or, you know, the global sales partners to make this definition, mission, and vision. And lastly, what is important to make for the decision maker is to make recommendations, because it could be also very overwhelming to see a big vision, mission, and we want to reach that within, you know, 50 years. But it's also very nice also to give recommendations. So I'm going a little bit fast because I want to, so please do share your statements if you have, and the next assignment would be, you know, to build your own DEI case. Are there any questions so far? You will have also the PowerPoint, and so if you don't need to, you will have all the instructions. Oh, ERGs is more about the question in the chat. In the business world, it's employee resource groups. So certain groups like the LGBT group or the women group or the Black people of color group, and so that's more in bigger organization, but it's similar to a DEI committee. Okay, so next slide, please, Gigi. Panel talk. Finally, I stopped to speak. So to inspire you, we invited two persons that you already know if you were there at the kickoff event. I will share also you the link because you did a very great presentation about DEI in general. So I will advise you to have a look on that. I will share the link after. But we invited Mignon and Tushar to share about their experiences, because in the organizations Human Rights Watch and AIDS Fund Nederland, they have done actually already quite a lot in terms of DEI, but also like starting a DEI strategy. And we would like to invite you to share your experiences with us. Are you here? Hello?
Yep. Right.
Hi, both. Hi. Thank you to be here. Very, very happy to have you here again, and for your fidelity to this trajectory. We prepared, of course, some questions, so we will have 15 minutes, something like that, before you will leave also Minion us. But so let's start by you. Could you introduce yourself and tell a little bit more how DEI relates to you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here and excited to be part of the panel. Really briefly, my name is Minion Tolan. I'm the Global Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Human Rights Watch. For me personally, just how why DEI matters to me personally.
Personally,
Yeah, so I've been in DEI related work for about 15 years, I'll say for me, growing up, DEI was sort of a theme of my life without knowing it. So I was born in Sri Lanka, and I grew up in the Netherlands until I moved to the United States for graduate school. But growing up in the Netherlands, as many of you know, DEI, and particularly in the earlier days, I did not feel a sense of belonging in our country, in my school, in my community. Of course, in my family, I did. But this idea of how do you create communities where everyone belongs? How do you address injustices? It's always been part of my thinking. So when I went into the professional space, I actually was more in the programmatic side of the nonprofit space. And I felt that as I was there, I did not feel a sense of belonging, but I also saw that there was such a difference between how we live, what values we have in the NGO sector and the lived experience inside. And that to me felt out of integrity. And so I started my DEI work informally, then became a consultant, and then, I'm now doing this work, been doing this work professionally for a long time. But it's not an accident that I do this work, right? It's deeply personal to me.
Thank you, Minion. Tusha, you want to share something about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us. My name is Tushar Malik, he, him pronouns. I'm the part-time diversity and inclusion trailblazer here at Eetsfonds, Zoiets Nederland, based out of Amsterdam. I'm Indian, and I also, interestingly, lived in the United States before I moved to the Netherlands. So a little bit of a flip from Indian. But just kind of tagging along to what you said about experiences. Growing up in India, I never felt that I was different. But as a queer person, of course, that was the first time that it actually hit me. Okay, what does exclusion feel like? What does it feel like to be a criminal in your own country? And it wasn't. And then all those experiences started to add on. Eventually, going to the United States and suddenly becoming a person of color, which I never was before. So suddenly someone else has labeled you a new, bit of diversity, a category in diversity. And it's always been super interesting to me across the work that I've done globally about how cross-cultural communication works, how your own identity influences your decision-making, how those of us who come from the grassroots activist world, where are we? What are our privileges? What are our challenges, even in a position of privilege, working with here, for instance, in the Netherlands, in a generically white environment, and what does it mean to be a non-white person, non-Dutch person, global North person coming from all of these experiences and also from the grassroots. So here at Eetsfonds, Zoiets Nederland, we have this really strong motivation to really put communities first, and we really started to dig deep into what does that mean? What does it mean to really have the voices of the communities not only represented in terms of the work that we do, but also in the programmatic staff, in how we think about what is our position of privilege as a funder, as decision makers. So how do we really switch that dynamic? How do we put Southern leadership first? So it's been a very interesting experience for me to bring the personal and the professional together here, as well as in all the years of work that I've done. And I'm just looking forward to also sharing this with this community of practice and getting to learn from others as well.
Thank you very much, both of you. Indeed, there's often with regards to DNI relationship with you know, personal identities and experiences, and I guess also all people here in this room. Mignon, could you maybe tell us a little bit how the DI journey started within your organization?
Sure. So, so I joined HRW, Human Rights Watch, in December of 2021. So about a year I've been there, and that's really the first time that there's an official, a full-time senior leader. I'm part of senior management. There's a budget, there's a DEI office, right? It's very new, and we're building it. So that's part of my job, is to establish the function formally in the organization after years of staff-led initiatives. So there have been many staff, especially staff of marginalized identities, as you can imagine, who've been carrying this work, the burden of this work disproportionately. But they have done incredible work. There was a DEI task force for a few years. Some of the leadership and the HR team, they've been trying to work on this. A lot of staff on the programmatic side have been working on what it means. There's a race, rights, racism, and colonialism discussion group that's been around for years. So on the programmatic side, so it's been very organic. And I'll say one of the things that happened for me in Amnesty, at Amnesty, I was and I was there as the Chief Inclusion and Strategic Innovation Officer. I was also the first one in the role. And for both of these organizations, separate initiatives have happened, a little bit of training, a little bit of things in HR, some things on the programmatic side, but nothing that was cohesive in a strategy, in that was part of the organizational fabric. But what the staff-led initiatives also led to was to create the understanding of the leadership of the boards that a function was needed, that more investment and deliberate action was needed. And so for both of these organizations I've been part of, I was very mindful that this role was created partly because of the efforts of staff who've over the years demonstrated the importance of this, and the recognition of the limitations of having this be staff-led without someone who is necessarily the trained expert on this and with the right level of investment. So it has been very organic, but we're now establishing the office, the strategy, the function, and how it all works with other people in the organization, building a shared common understanding, as you've been talking about already. And really starting in very concrete ways. The DEI strategy is huge. It's everything, right? So what we've been trying to do as well is, while we build this broader strategy and vision and work, I've always found it really helpful to also work on very concrete, smaller things that people can influence and contribute to and practice their skills to make this work more accessible and to make it more collaborative and something you can kind of, you can grapple with. It's manageable. It's not this big thing that just you don't know where to start. And so that's what I've been trying to do, both at the long-term side and at the smaller side. We're trying to get very concrete about some actions and things that we're implementing at the moment.
Thanks, Mignon. And you have the locals on your organization indeed to have, already like a function for that, and which is not the case at all. I'm mostly an organization. I was just curious about, in this room, who has really paid staff to do this work? No, nobody.
And if I may just add, one of the things that I've also seen staff-led groups do, for organizations that don't have paid staff, is to actually, one of the big things that you can do is to also identify the right external consultants to be the right partner for you, even if there's not internal. It's not all organizations have that. I've worked in organizations where that's not an option, and I totally understand that. But then you need both the staff energy and you need the expertise, and then also sometimes an external voice can help with the organization and the leadership to be more motivated and informed to do this work. So sometimes that's a really powerful action that you can take as staff.
Definitely. Who has already hired consultants to make, I don't know, an audit or an assessment, or already, think about your strategy? I see some hands. Okay. That's already a bit more. No, that's nice. Okay. Thank you, Mignon. Tushar, how did the journey start at 8 months?
I think it resonates quite a lot with the, the last question that he asked about like paid staff versus, just everyone volunteering. Like, so we have a voluntary group of generally, people of different diverse intersectional identities who were coming together once in a couple of months and talking about what needed to be talked about at the organization in terms of diversity and inclusion. But again, like, none of this was paid time. None of this was really supported besides like, creating that space for this conversation. And one of the things, and I was part of this group as well, and one of the things that came up was that we do really need an external consultant to come in to do a baseline assessment of where we are at. Because us as AIDS Fonds Soweto Nederland, like we work with so many diverse communities, and we do have a lot of community representation, for instance, in terms of LGB people in the organization, but the trans and the intersex, that is lagging behind. In terms of, we also do work with sex workers and people who use drugs, and really we asked ourselves, like, are we ready? Are we there yet? So there were so many of these questions about, like, us having the motivation to put communities first, but are we as an organization ready? So we had this external consultant who came in who did a baseline assessment to see where exactly are we, both in terms of diversity and inclusion. And one of the recommendations from that was also to really create some paid time for our staff. So that's my position. That's why it's called a trailblazer, to be able to, again, just implement some very low-hanging fruit, some things that are just urgent, that are really needed right now. Even my assignment is only an 8-month assignment, which is coming to an end, with the ambition that, this should stay embedded in the different functions of the management team, so that, they become champions for the different streams of work that we want to take forward. Like, it was talking about like a DEI strategy. We don't have a strategy. We have like a list of, we have an action plan at this point, which is just, okay, so these are the things we want to do. But in terms of longer term thinking, we do need to develop the strategy. Someone needs to really hold that, feel that sense of ownership to be able to take that forward. Now, whether that means like, it is a champion from the management team, or it means a person who's just pushing this through with paid time, I think it's really important to have someone who's spearheading that, because a lot of the times, like us in nonprofits, we keep on forgetting that people have the motivation, people really want to do things, but the work that we're doing, especially when we're working with grassroots activists, we're working with communities that are facing troubles and challenges on a day-to-day basis. Like, there are many other things externally that we're so focused on that we keep forgetting that internally, like, we just don't have the time, we have the motivation. So it is so important to like actually allocate that time and resources to be able to pursue what we aim to achieve. Otherwise, it just falters, it just falls through the cracks again and again. And I say this from our own personal experience, because when I joined this role, I sat down with someone in HR who said that we have had a D&I plan of action that was put on paper twice before in the last 5 years, and it never resulted in anything because there was literally no one who had time to take that forward. So it's so important to create that space and also the resources for that.
So time and money. But also people, and that we will speak also later. And I'm very also in breakout rooms, because then you can also share your experiences in your role into the starting a DI strategy or facilitating a DI working group, or I don't know. So I'm really also interested to hear that after your discussions. Maybe a last question to you both, Mignon, before you leave. Could you share a little bit at what stage is your organization right now? What did you achieve, and maybe what are the next steps? Could you share a little bit about that? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, just building also on what Zuhair said about sort of the there's plans, and then there is what happens with the plans. And one of the things that I've always found, and I think I've said this in my when I previously talked with you all, which is that so much of what I'm finding around the needs on DEI are related to other needs in the organization that the DEI office or a DEI committee cannot move forward on their own, even if you had the time or the money, because, or the expertise, it's all interconnected. So for example, one of the things that we're working on right now is building, when I say building, we're building the infrastructure for the function and for the work, the long-term work. And that means that we're actually doing things that are organization-wide needs beyond DEI that then allow for the success of DEI. So one of the things that we're doing is we don't really have a lot of like an organization-wide learning and development strategy. And so, we've created a working group with the L&D manager who has held this work for a long time. And we're working now on deciding, okay, what does the organization want in terms of a learning culture? We're getting a learning management system, like the technology that we need, all of these things around, let's build the basics so that we can then also add DEI to it and integrate DEI into existing training versus it just being a bunch of separate DEI training. On data work, right? There's not been a whole lot of data collection in a consistent and cohesive way, both on staff in terms of demographics and engagement and other things, but also on the monitoring and evaluation side on the external programmatic work. So now we're thinking through, okay, what data are we missing, right? That we then need to work on to build those capabilities for the organization, then also will be deeply intertwined with DEI. So that's a big part of what we're doing is trying to identify those broader organizational needs that will help to set DEI up for success. And then we're working on very dedicated things like creating resources and guidelines on inclusive language or accessible events or partnership, anti-colonial practices to partnerships, working on creating a more equitable compensation model internally, and working on making sure that our supporter base has some way of engaging on DEI and making sure that their skills and engagement on this can be developing. So just a range of different things. And then a big part of the work is I actually myself am looking to bring in global consultants on DEI because I just simply don't have the capacity with my team to do all of it. So that's another big piece of the puzzle, to identify those right partners for us that have the global appreciation for this. And then the other big part of the work is on working with the senior leadership more closely to develop our goals. We're working on a global strategy organization-wide, so making sure DEI is part of that, getting clear on the vision. And I think that we always have to, what I think you put it so well, right? There's something, this assumption we know what this means. But, what are we doing as an organization? Are we trying to make some tweaks? Are we trying to just make a few adjustments to be more values aligned, or are we truly trying to become an anti-colonialist organization that is going into the future very differently over the course of maybe 5 to 10 years than it has been in the past? That's a different vision. That's a different context in which we're doing this work, and we're still building that. And we're also bringing in a new executive director after 30 years. Our previous director left, and so that is a consequential decision, and I'm involved in wherever I can. It's a board decision, obviously, but I'm supporting on that, and that will hopefully help bring this all together so that we can do the work. So in other words, a long way of saying that I always feel like the first 1 or 2 years of more formalized DEI work is about building organizational readiness to really do the work. And people always feel like, oh my goodness, if we have to wait that long. We don't. We make progress in other ways, in small ways, but it is about how do we create the organizational understanding, the muscle, the skill set, the awareness, the appreciation for what this work really means, and that takes time. So really, we're sort of in the earlier stages of that in my organization, I would say.
Thank you, Mignon. That is so inspiring also to have really this practical example. And indeed, you are like in a bit in a privileged position in the organization who is already investing, but also the fact, and I see, for instance, in a question in the chat, when you don't have a lot of money, how do you work on that? And that's also the whole, trajectory before, like having, recommendation, advocate to the most highest position, whether it is a board or the direction or the managers, to bring them to the idea, because it's not logical for them maybe to invest money when it's not built on this vision, which is also contributing to your strategic goals, like as an organization, and that takes some time. But it takes also some time to to try to convince. So you need to also not have also facilitators, but also advocates within the organization who can also convene the message to the decision makers. And we will see it after, without decision makers, you cannot go so far. And that's actually the first step before getting money. And I don't have so much experience neither about having money from fundings. I don't know if there is in the room, but that could be maybe also a possibility. I have no idea.
And can I just add really briefly, and then I actually have to drop off and I'll come back. I actually meeting with the co-chairs of our DEI task force right now, and they're globally dispersed. So we have to, this is the only time that works. So I have to drop off and come back. But what I wanted to say about the money, the question about money, I will tell you, in both of my organizations, I probably used less than 10% of my budget, of my annual budget initially, because so much of the work is actually not about spending huge amount of dollars. I mean, certainly there's cost involved with consultants or, but a lot of it is working, like having conversations, working with people to create understanding, find your advocates, so find the people that can help move this forward. It's identifying small things within existing bodies of work, within existing things you're doing that already have a budget associated with it. So if you're working on improving your recruitment system, make sure that the DEI thinking is part of that. Maybe it's not where you want to be in 5 years, but it is something that you can do now. And so I would say, although I know exactly what resource constraint, I completely have, worked in an organization with very differing budgets, and I've worked in the for-profit sector a lot too, where they have huge budgets, but very little progress, right? And I've seen also nonprofit organizations had pretty much no budget and have made some really impressive area progress. And so I would just say, although that's a very well constrained, there are so many things that we can and should be doing that actually don't require a whole lot of money initially. And some of that is just, is all of the things that you're talking about now. And that's why I think this training, the trajectory, and all of this is such an incredible value add for all of the organizations to learn from each other, because that is not the case. And that is almost your most valuable resource, more so than money. It's other colleagues who are trying to do this work and have these ideas. So that's what I've always tried to lean on when it became very challenging to have the resources. So I apologize, I have to drop off, but I'll be back in a little bit.
Thank you, Mignon. Thank you very much. You give us a hope. That's great.
Good. That's the only, if we don't have hope, we are not in the right business. I think that's true for both the sector and for DEI. So, all right. Thank you
very much. Tushar, we have 5 minutes left for what was it? Oh yeah, what are you currently do in your organization, and what are the next steps that you are, if you have some, that you are doing in the AIDS funds?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm going to make a couple of people very happy, because I'm going to specifically talk about what to do when you don't have that much money. And that's basically something that I've been dealing with for quite some time. So let me tell you that, getting people on board with putting resources, it took us a good 2.5 years of continuously talking about it. And then finally getting an external consultant to do a baseline who also had the same recommendation. And again, how people get motivated or inspired to jump on, to join your message, and to really see the value in adding on, actual dedicated hours for someone to push this through. It takes time. It's again, getting senior leadership to understand that. And sometimes it is as simple as getting an external consultant who's saying the exact same thing that you're saying. And all our organizations are very different. Sometimes they think that what is coming from inside is totally worth it, and they'll take that on board. Sometimes someone from outside needs to remind them this is what the standard is everywhere else. In our case, it was a mixture of both. And just to also let you know, so the reason that my role is called Trailblazer is literally because it's an 8-month assignment to just push through some of the most, low-hanging fruit, the most important things that we need to do. And that's how we started that. So in our organization, what we are doing is a little bit of a reverse way, where we are pushing forward with certain things that were really necessary in terms of our diversity and inclusion plan of action. So something like creating a policy around diverse hiring, really understanding which positions could really use a significant shift in thinking, significant input from communities, people with lived experiences in those decision-making positions, because that is linked to our strategy. So getting that policy on board, getting it passed, something as simple as how to ensure that our organization actually is fully bilingual, how to ensure that it is, not an equal system of people learning both languages, Dutch and English, but an equitable system to ensure that people feel included and it's an inclusive place. What does that mean in terms of our training budget? Like something as simple as that. Or actually just like convening people together. Like, I mean, if you don't have any budget, like creating a little panel discussion, bringing a space where different leaders, different team leaders from different teams are coming together and talking about like, what are they doing in terms of inclusion? We, in the last 2-3 years, have shifted significantly, at least in our international work, in terms of how many colleagues within our organization are non-Dutch. Like, I mean, it was probably, I think out of like 30 or 40 colleagues, we had maybe 3 or 4 colleagues that were non-Dutch, and now we've got at least 13 to 15 colleagues, and that's a significant change that has happened. So how do you like move ahead with the times? Why is that needed? What is needed in terms of like the conversations? Like, how are we, is it like, appointing a buddy? Is it just, really sitting together with someone else and learning about their culture or their lived experiences? And how do you create that environment of a willingness to learn? And so, and the thing is that involving team leaders, involving people around, like other staff in these kind of conversations and creating that space for this exchange is a no cost, very simple way to really start creating a sense of inclusion. And then you create this case where we literally had, I organized this during a strategy day, and we had like, our colleagues from the national team and the international team were sitting together, and they were sharing the best practices with each other. And they were like, oh, we should totally do this as well. And so you don't even need to have a person there, maybe just someone who's facilitating this exchange, but it's mostly about ensuring that all of these best practices are not lost, the momentum is not lost, and that we keep elevating this, we keep sharing this with the organization, so that even the leadership at some point of time understands what is the value of that. And a lot of our organizations, there might be leadership which says that, oh yes, absolutely, we have such a strong mission in terms of DEI, yes, this is what we want to do, or they might make these plans, but in terms of the implementation, in terms of the buy-in, like unless they actually see change happening, they see the culture of the organization changing, and they realize that they have to change with that. Like sometimes that's the hardest part. Like we've had leaders who were literally champions, and we've had leaders who I kid you not, I was at one of the meetings and someone was just like, but what about men, in a conversation with I mean, it's just sometimes like it gets very interesting to, just like we're going so deep into the intersectionality, and then someone is just asking some very basic question. And how do you create that space where it's okay to ask a, what some might consider a silly question, or some might consider like, oh my God, are you still talking about like conversations from the 90s? But really, it is to create that culture of like having these conversations, and that doesn't take money. It just takes, effort from some people. It just takes, someone being ready, or someone who's ready to say, you know what, maybe I will lead this conversation. And I guess that's what I mean. And the way that you get there is whether you have an external consultant who tells you this, whether it is a person from within the organization who says this is what is needed, whether it is literally, it doesn't even have to be senior level management. It is just, let's say, even a team leader who says, you know what, I want to have these conversations more. Let's say during just the lunch break, create a panel discussion. I mean, there's so much that can happen. And the way that we did this was also by just hitting all of the low-hanging fruit, like, changing the labels into both Dutch and English in our kitchen. That was a huge step for people. And it was so easy. So I would say, have a look around, like literally walk through your office, walk through, like spend an entire week and figure out like, what are these tiny little, little wins that you can really cash in on, and then start building that momentum, because people's happiness, people's feeling of like finally feeling included, yeah, I mean, that is priceless. Like, and that can really, 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 that's just the spark that you need to create the sense of, oh, wow, we can do something altogether. And I would say that if you start that way, there's definitely, you know, from management, you can start applying for like budgets and stuff. That's how we did it.
So great, Tusha. It gives also a lot of inspiration. And what you said, you know, to create this readiness is to create the spaces of conversations that we're having now also, and the sharing best practices also outside of the organization, bringing it back, invite trainers, consultants, whatever, or creating, you know, one space about diversity and inclusion during a strategic day, or everything that you mentioned are small steps to take, but it makes a lot of change. And I notice it also in my organization, and it's a continuous work. It's not like you have one conversation about a very small topic about diversity and inclusion and then it's done, but more, what do we need to learn? What do we need to improve? What do we need to do to, you know, become more diverse and inclusive? And that's the start of the conversation in most organizations right now.
Yeah, and just to quickly comment also, like, you know, I feel like in bigger organizations, like, you know, you first create a DE&I strategy. We don't have one yet. Like, I am finally at the point where, because of the little wins that we've had, I can have that conversation to say that this is the investment we need if we are going to create, like, you know, a longer term sustainable impact in terms of inclusion within the organization. Like, this is where we need to include it into our strategic, like our next multi-year strategy. Like, we really need to bring that there. Something as simple as, how do we build an accountability, like in our reporting for diversity and inclusion? It's finally getting that space. We've had that. Like, I mean, it's just like literally an extra tab in an Excel file, but it finally is there because people see the value in that, and people see that even a small bit of reporting, a small bit of accountability can create so much more impact, and it can also create this sense of ownership for people to say, okay, I am responsible in 3 months to report on this in a quarterly report. What have we done? What are we planning to do? And that itself can really create that momentum to think about a multi-year strategy, to think about something that's like, I mean, what are next learning trajectories? What, as an organization, do we really need to ensure that every single person in the organization is learning around diversity, equity, and inclusion? So we're starting that process now, and that's through these small wins.
Thank you very much, Tusha. Thank you for your inspirational talk. We need to move forward, unfortunately, because we have only 2 hours. So thank you again, and but you stay in the room. So if people have questions, then it can also happen during the breaking out room. I would suggest just, I will tell you 2 words about the assignment. So first step that you can take, then we take a break of 5 minutes, and then we come back to discuss about your own role into the DI strategy in group discussions. And then after, we will come back in plenary and sharing you a framework that you can use to build up your DI strategy. Gigi, do you want to share the PowerPoint slide about the assignment, please? Yeah, this one. So what we will ask you to do is, in the meantime, within your DI groups, or if you don't have a group alone, but with the more people involved, and especially underrepresented groups, to ask yourself, if we would be sitting in 10, 30 years from now, what should the organization look like with DEI? What do you want to achieve in terms of DEI, and when would you have been successful? It seems like easy questions, but I think it's a lot of discussion. So you can, you know, make a session about that with more or less people in, you know, I don't know how it's called in English, Heidag, or like, you know, employees day, something like that. Take 2 hours to make it the discussion. You can do it also, ask this question via survey. You can, you know, have focus groups, whatever you want, what fits best. And then the goal of this assignment is then, well, for you to take the steps to make a DI case, but also to discuss it during the walk-in session on the 22nd of February, I think, and to share with the other participants in this room and to discuss about, you know, the similarities, the non-similarities, the words that you use, the goals that differs maybe a little bit, and to discuss that into the group discussions on the 22nd of February. Is it clear? Yes. I would suggest to make a little break of 5 minutes, and then we will come back for the last parts.
I think we can start. If you can switch on your camera if you're comfortable with that. Otherwise, hopefully you're following us in the back. The floor is yours, Nina.
Yes, can you please go to the slide? So we will skip that part because I think you will find everything, all the questions that you need to ask yourself about who you will engage into the DEI strategy. But basically, well, you need to think about the constitution of your organization and who are actively involved into that. So the what I call the activists or the advocates. The people who might be great supporters or allies. Then you have people who are clearly opponents to DEI. It can exist also, and to kind of identify these actors, or the movable middle, which means actually the people who doesn't have any opinion about that, but can move to to more acceptance or to a rejection. So that is also a part to analyze. So I give you a lot of questions about, when you speak about the DEI, how do you engage a conversation with the different actors? So you can read it later. And the next slide, please, Gigi.
Because I think one point is important to not make any assumptions about personas or who the actors are. What are ways, or have you included also questions that help you to validate your own assumptions?
Yeah, the thing is that that is more to have in mind, but all the questions that you have on the left side is it's not putting anybody in categories, but is to engage a conversation, to know more or less if the people are active or are opponents. So it's not that you are defining that in before. But it's important to take that into account when that you can pass, that we will see after about leaders, and you will see it. And what we advise you is when you are thinking about a strategy is also to make a stakeholder mapping. I don't know, probably most of you know this tool, but the goal is to engage key stakeholders early on in the DEI strategy, and to know exactly who can be what. And it helps also to secure resources, but also clarity on roles in who is doing what into the strategy. I'll skip this part because I think the most important, again, is the discussion, and also the third part is about how. Is it okay if we start now the discussions about, yeah, that would be an assignment that we will give you after to make the stakeholder mapping. Maybe you can go to the other slide, the breakout. Group discussion, yeah. So we are interested in you. What is your role for promoting DEI within your organization, and especially with who you work? So with who you are engaging, who are the people who really think along and to in promoting DEI, and if you have in mind, thinking also about the supporters, the opponents, the movement middle, if you have experience in dealing with opponents or facilitating buy-in or to ensure commitment. I know it's a lot of questions, but the first question is, what is your role and with whom you are working? So we will send you in groups of 5 people. We will have 10 minutes discussion. I know it's short, but then we will have a very short feedback, and then we will do the part 3. Are you okay?
In 15 seconds, the other rooms are also closed. And perhaps I can already invite some of you, anyone who would like to share something that has been shared in the group, or something personal, something that stood out. Any hands? Anyone who would like to share something from the group?
I would like to.
Yes, go ahead.
It was nice to, besides the story of Tushar, to see that all 4 organizations being there, we're all in different stage. And someone is starting, someone has started, someone is a bit further. So someone do it voluntary or, don't have any pay hours for it. And some do. So it's, looking like what can I learn from you and how did you do that? It was very nice to exchange. Yeah.
Thanks. I see Sidra has her hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Yuji. So I also think it's not just, I agree with the fact that everyone's at a different stage, because that's also what I observed, but it's also everyone's has, unique roles in what they're performing. So some people are still identifying who stakeholders would be, but then there are others who are at the strategic level and making, global commitments for their organizations, working at the policy level. There are others who are working more at the ground, level, or maybe more directly with the country teams. So I think that was also different tiers that we saw across the group.
Have a chance to also dive into the question, who are we actually engaging with? Or if you were able to identify some of those actors in your organization.
I can share some if you want. So for example, I'm not sure if we're supposed to be naming people, but someone in the group mentioned that they were part of, so it was an employee-led task force, and it's sponsored by the director. So it's internal looking, but, and then they're also part of, at the global level of, in the Anti-Racism Council. There's another organization has a working group on DEI. A third one is starting out. Another organization is signing the diversity charter with the Socio-Economic Council in Netherlands. So I think that's another commitment that they have. For now, they have work plans, but now the commitment will ask them to have more of a strategic level, I guess, direction. And there is a DEI work group that they have, of which they have a chair, and so I'm not taking names just so that yeah.
I'd like to just say as well, so I work with VSO, and actually the directorship has also bought into the idea and are very committed to pushing forward DEI, but also looking at how to integrate it within systems, processes such as HR, finance, and just making sure that it is embedded. So in terms of, I know there was a question earlier about the consultants, and that is the next step for VSO, bringing in external consultants. And I guess in some ways bringing it down to that practical level, rather than it remain a policy level, but actually looking at our own values, our day-to-day behaviours that we bring into the workforce, into the workplace. So that's for me.
DEI in your organization and linking it to existing structures. I think Nina will take it over for the final part of the presentation. We have 13 minutes remaining, so it will be a bit quick, I think, but nevertheless, very interesting. Let me share my screen again.
Thank you, Gigi. Well, I will rush, so excuse me if I speak quick. Usually I speak quick, but now it will be quicker. But just for the assignment also, I think it's good to engage a conversation and then also to keep on, sharing these experiences. And that is the first part of the trajectory, but the goal, because I know so these group discussions are, key, to learn from each other. So we will also dedicate more time for that. For the assignment, this one is optional maybe, but you can do a stakeholder analysis based on what I said before, about the who, think a little bit more further about who can be engaged, who could be a resistant factor. And for that, I had some links to, about how to make a stakeholder mapping. I will not explain that here. I think everybody can read that. And then if you want to, you can do also this assignment and discuss it until the next walk-in session. But now let's speak within 5 minutes about the wow, the how. So what are the practical steps that you can take? We have already spoken about the DEI case. So that's really, I think, the first step that you can make and ensure that the DEI case is aligned to your organization vision. Second step that you can make, again, you can do it before the DEI case or after, but is to make a baseline assessment about how does diversity look like, how is the environment in terms of inclusivity and equity, and to analyze available data. You will not have all data available, but you have probably through HR analytics or through other, I don't know about your organization, but there are already data and there are already practices and there are already procedures and policies which are promoting DEI probably. So to make kind of baseline assessment. Third step, again, make a recommendation and establish priorities. Again, it is also very worrying when you see a very, very big plan and that you think, okay, we are not going to reach it for the next couple of years. But to make recommendations and priorities helps for decision makers to support the process. Fourth is involve all important stakeholders. So that's why it's important to make this stakeholder mapping. But the fifth step is to define, but it's like any kind of action plan. You need then to have goals, outcomes, indicators with clear milestones. And I will show you the framework for that. Then make a pre-action plan with recommendations and present it to the board, to the direction, to the managers, to make it concrete. Then you can, based on your plan, gather data in order to measure success. And we will have a whole, module about measuring and mentoring DEI. The third module will be about that. And the eighth step is communicate broadly, internally and externally. So that's why about this statement, diversity and inclusion statement, that you can, show to the world, but also to communicate your plan to the rest of the organization. And you know how it is. And if you send the 20 pages, nobody will read that. But if you make a session or go per team, and discuss about the approach, you will have more buy-in and also contributing to the transparency of the process. You can go to next slide, Gigi. That is, I think, the theory of change. So to give a direction, I made a theory of change that you can use. This is an example how you can approach it, because mostly people think, or who have no idea about DEI, we think that it's by instance only a HR thing, or it's only a DEI committee thing, and this schema just shows you actually which levels you need to work on. So this is I will not explain in detail. You can read it also quietly when you are back. But you have, so per pillar you can work on different actions, outcomes and actions related to that. So for instance, the organizational level, is to see about everything which is linked to policies, to accessibility, to anything which is, you know, on a policy level. Then you have the HR level, which is really much focused on the procedures, policies, and practices, so about recruitment and etc. The community level is more how do you engage actually the DEI committees or other groups to have a legitimate voice and also have action, you know, into the DEI strategy. You have the leadership level, very important. We will also have a module about inclusive leadership and how to create a space for them to discuss leaders about DEI, but also to learn to have inclusive attitudes and reflections towards their teams. And the last level is about the individual level. That means that the employees, you're striving to, more inclusion. So you need also to measure the feeling of inclusion, being safe, being heard, and it includes also, of course, so the whole thing, a part about learning, communicating, and monitoring success. It's very, seems a little bit complicated, but it gives some direction to present it when you, make different levels for people to be a little bit more involved on this level or another level. And if you want more, also ask more question about that, you can also contact me, and then I will also. It takes some time, to explain how it works, but you can do that too. Let's go to the slide after, please, Gigi, and then I think it's the last one. Yeah. Well, again, it comes by repetition. So next step that you can take, if you have not done that still, it's about thinking, why would you need a DI strategy, and build your DI case. Engage people emotionally. So you have these questions at the second part that you can ask to people who are important, who can be activists, who can be supporters into the process, and to integrate them, in the reflection of the DI strategy, but also in the, execution. Create a safe space or intentional space to voice people's concerns, but also ideas, to get input of, and especially underrepresented groups. Engage stakeholders. That's the same buy-in and engage the top of the organization. It seems very easy, but I think you get it, that it's both a bottom and a top movement. Set up an executive DI committee if you don't have one, and I think it's also important. We will have also a discussion in module 4 about what is the role exactly of this committee. What could be the different roles of this committee? It could be that, of course, that they are engaged into the creation of a DI strategy, but what are the next steps when the DI strategy is created? What is the role of this kind of, is it a mandate or is it a representation role, or is it a role of getting, information about something that is not going right, or giving advice, etc. So we will have also a discussion about that. And finally, and that was the beginning of our conversation, make time and money available, and at least for a few years, because Tusha, you said also that some organization wants to see a little bit if it's working, and I understand that some organizations say, okay, you get a mini budget for 1 year, but it's also good to show that this kind of strategies is at least for 5 years. So there is also some reflections about being ready also to make time and money available for a little longer than just a few months. Next slide. I think it's that's tips, and we have 3 minutes left, so you can read it after, but yeah, it's quite easy. Don't copy paste DI programs, and it needs to be tailor-made on your organization. Have a DI strategy and stick to it. Remain flexible, and you can also learn by error and trial. and raise awareness and communicate in a transparent and broad way. Are there any questions at this point? It's the end of the presentation. It's getting a bit fast, but it's more recommendations and steps that you can take than really getting into detail. Gigi, we don't hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes, yes, no.
No, we will share the presentation by mail as well. So all the material will be shared on Microsoft Teams, but also by mail, because I realize not everybody has access yet. So you should be fine.
Oh, I have also a last thing to share. Also, what can also guide your reflection is the checklist that you got. You got a checklist before engaging into the trajectory that maybe you have a feeling or maybe you don't, but it's also based on this theory of change. So every level is then represented into this checklist, and you can base also your reflection about the DEI strategy by answering the answer of this checklist and analyze them. And then we will come back to the to your answers at the end of the year to see if there have been made some progress within 1 year about building your DEI strategy. Yeah, I think Gigi, you can close the.
Yeah, you had some reading suggestions as well.
Yeah, reading suggestions, very, very good books. My favorite, the one on the left, Inclusie Marathon, is only now in Dutch, but will come also in English. It's very basic, but also very nice to understand what do you need to do. So if you go read it, it's very good. This is also a new book. I didn't read it fully, but it's also very critical about DEI. It's a DEI deconstructed from Lily Shen, and it's very good and very political, and also asking also critical questions about DEI. And the last one, and I think it's more interesting but it's interesting for everybody. It's not only about inclusive leader, but it's explaining you how do you pass from a passive position regarding DEI and then becoming aware about the importance and how you become an advocate. So it gives a lot of framework to leaders, but also to everyone to get more into the perception of DEI and getting convinced of its importance. Okay, Gigi? Laura,
I just have a very quick question. So about the assignments, are they primarily for ourselves to progress in our, I mean, to me, of course, they are for ourselves, but are they also tools to build up for the next session? Are we going to use them in a concrete way in the next session, or is it more something that's there's some kind of parallel approach that we're doing as we are progressing in our DEI strategies?
But basically, the tools are first for your organization, and so you can take time to fill in the assignments. But the second, what I said, we will discuss this assignment if you have time to do that with the committee, etc., on the 22nd of February, and then speak, create some time to get, give a feedback about how it was, what are the outcomes, what did you notice. So it's advised that you have done something, because then we can keep on the discussion.
Thank you.
Gigi, we don't hear you. Yes. Still not.
Better?
Yeah.
The assignments will be useful for the coming modules as well. Maybe not necessarily module 2, which is focusing on diversity, dimensions, and intersectionality, but having your DEI strategy, having your DEI case ready helps you as well when it comes to then understanding what type of indicators you should be looking for when creating a monitoring plan. So we will definitely build on some of those elements. And I guess that in any case, being very intentional about your work, which you would do in in establishing a DEI case, will help you throughout this whole course, learning trajectory. I wanted to highlight the last following steps, and then we can the session. I wanted to ask everybody to please fill out the survey. That's the organizational DEI checklist. If you haven't done so, please do it in time. This will be also returned back to you. So each individual organization will try to share your input as well. And we will also have visualizations of where we are as a group. Partos will use this as a baseline to also understand progress across the whole trajectory. So it's very important for us to have it. The walk-in sessions, you've received the information and invitations by mail. And please really use that for more engagement and interaction, because we've had limited time today. So those sessions are perfect for sharing thoughts and ideas. And then as well, save the date for the upcoming modules. We will share more information. We're cooking on some very interesting sessions with interesting collaborators. And also, if you have any suggestions or ideas or needs, send them to me or post them in the group, and perhaps we can make that a collective effort, or facilitate a workshop if we need specific assistance or yeah, consultancy for something. And with the last word, I wanted to say we talked about the what, we talked about the who, and about the how, but also stay close to your why and be intentional in every single step. And I think that will really inform a lot of work that we're doing, because it's not just about a business case, it's really about people, and there are always motivations and intentions behind people. So that's my giveaway. I wanted to thank you so much for being here, and if you want to stick around, I'll be here as well for any questions. But I wish you a very pleasant rest of your day, and see you next time.